Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a really fascinating and potentially kind of groundbreaking new area of study. We're calling it evolutionary philosophy.
It's a new way to look at some of those classic philosophical questions
Yeah.
through, through the lens of evolution, of course.
Yeah. And we're going to be working with some material from James Berryhill, who's really one of the leading voices arguing for the establishment of this new field.
And it's a field that pulls in so many different areas. It's not just philosophy, right? We're talking
Really?
about biology, cognitive science, even, philosophy of mind.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. First things first. Why do we even need this new field? I mean, can't existing branches of philosophy like ethics or epistemology just incorporate evolutionary principles? Why do we need a whole new field for this?
Right. Well, that's exactly the question that Berryhill addresses head on. And he argues that, while evolutionary ideas have definitely influenced subfields of philosophy, especially, the philosophy of biology, having a dedicated field, it allows for a much more unified approach, a much more comprehensive approach.
Okay, so it's not just about adding evolution as a topic. It's about using evolution as like a lens.
Yeah.
A lens to re-examine these fundamental questions that philosophers have been grappling with forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shifts that whole conversation from, just asking what is X to how did X evolve?
I see. Okay, so instead of just asking like what is knowledge, we ask like how did the human capacity for knowledge, how did that evolve?
Precisely. And it's a subtle shift, but I think you can see how it could lead to some really truly novel insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what would this new field, what would it actually look like? What specific areas would evolutionary philosophy explore?
Well, as you might imagine, it could encompass a very wide range of philosophical domains. Berryhill specifically points to areas like evolutionary epistemology, right?
Yeah.
Which is the study of, how our ability to acquire knowledge, how that evolved. And of course, there's the evolution of ethics, which I think we'll definitely want to spend some time on.
Yeah, the evolution of morality. That's a huge one, right?
Well,
I mean, that's such an endlessly fascinating topic. So what are some of the specific arguments that Berryhill presents?
So one of the things he does is he really challenges that very prevalent notion that morality is solely a product of organized religion.
Okay.
Instead, he proposes this really interesting four-stage evolutionary model, and it's meant to sort of demonstrate how morality developed, over time.
Okay, so what are these four stages then?
Yeah.
What does he lay out?
Well, stage one is really interesting. It basically says that, basic empathy and altruism, things we actually observe, even in primates, like chimpanzees, that represents a rudimentary kind of morality.
So even before we had these, complex human societies, there were these seeds of morality present in our primate ancestors.
Exactly, yeah. Stage two suggests that as early humans developed these more complex social structures, they would needed more sophisticated moral codes to effectively manage these larger groups.
So morality in that context would have been driven by this need for cooperation and for group survival.
Precisely. And this brings us to stage three, which is really well represented by hunter-gatherer societies.
Okay.
And, they didn't have organized religion, but they had these well-developed moral systems. I mean, they had rules for sharing, rules for conflict resolution, and all sorts of, societal taboos.
Wow. Okay. So it seems like this nuanced understanding of morality, it existed long before the advent of organized religion.
Exactly. And that leads us to stage four, which is where organized religion enters the picture.
Right.
Berryhill argues that religion didn't invent morality. It acted more like a kind of scaling technology.
Scaling technology.
Yeah. It took those, pre-existing moral intuitions that were already there, and it amplified them, and it managed them in these, much larger, much more complex societies.
Okay. So religion provided a framework for codifying and enforcing moral principles on this much larger scale.
Precisely.
But then that raises the question, right? Like, how do we even define morality? Like, how do we differentiate between, behavior that just looks moral, versus, genuine moral reasoning?
Right. It's a crucial question. How do we really define morality? And Berryhill, he highlights several key dimensions that we need to consider. one key element is this idea of conscious choice.
Okay.
You know, is the actor, are they aware that they're making a moral decision?
I see.
Or can you have, instinctual behavior in animals and it looks like, moral behavior, sharing food, for example. But can we call that true morality?
So the question is intent necessary for morality,
Yeah.
or can just actions alone be considered moral?
Exactly, yeah. And then there's this issue of consistency, Are these moral principles, are they applied uniformly across different situations, even when there's no direct benefit to the person taking the action?
That's a tough one, right? Because we know that humans are often really inconsistent in their moral actions.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole question of emotions versus reason.
Yeah.
Do our gut feelings, do they count as part of our moral compass?
Mhm.
Or does true morality require this kind of deliberate, reasoning process?
It seems like both are probably at play.
Yeah.
Right? Like both emotion and reason probably contribute to how we make moral decisions.
That's right. And then Berryhill also points to this really important aspect of cultural transmission.
Okay.
Can moral rules be passed down? Can they be debated? And this is something that really seems to separate human morality from just pure instinctual animal behavior.
Right. Right. But then again, there are certain animals like primates that do seem to exhibit some form of cultural transmission.
That's true. That's true. And that's where it gets really complex. Finally there's this idea of what Berryhill calls counterfactual moral reasoning. It's this capacity to envision, what should be.
Hmm.
And that seems to be a very uniquely human ability.
Right. Like imagining a better world, even if it goes against the grain of, current societal norms.
Exactly. So initially, Berryhill proposes this spectrum model to define morality. He says, it probably exists on more of a continuum,
Yeah.
Rather than just a binary, yes or no.
Okay.
But he later refines this and he argues that, really what we should be focusing on are the mechanisms that integrate those evolved tendencies into these really complex cultural systems.
So it's about understanding the bridge between that instinctual behavior and the really complex moral systems that we humans have created.
Right. And to further clarify this, he proposes these two distinct categories of morality:
Oh,
evolutionary morality and cultural morality.
okay, interesting. So what's the difference? What defines these two categories?
Well, evolutionary morality, those are those inherent genetically influenced behaviors that really just promote survival. Things like automatic emotional responses, instinctive cooperation, actions that are really driven by immediate needs. That forms the foundation, upon which more complex morality is then built.
Okay. And so what about cultural morality then?
Cultural morality that consists of consciously expressed principles,
Right.
and codified, ethical systems. So that includes the transmission of moral knowledge, institutions for enforcement, the capacity for moral reasoning and debate. So it's essentially taking those primal instincts and refining them into these complex systems.
That's a really helpful distinction, but I imagine that these two systems, they don't always operate in perfect harmony.
No, you're absolutely right. And exploring that potential conflict, that's going to be our next step in this deep dive.
Okay, so we've laid the foundation for evolutionary philosophy, and we've talked about the evolutionary origins of morality.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious about this tension, right? This potential conflict between our innate kind of moral instincts, and the demands of these cultural moral systems that we've created.
You're exactly right. I mean, it seems almost inevitable, right, that there would be this friction between these two forces.
Yeah.
And Berryhill, he gives us some really compelling examples of how this tension might actually play out in different aspects of human life. So let's start with cooperation and resource sharing, right? Our evolved instincts, the ones that were really honed in those small, tight-knit groups, they favor this direct reciprocity. You help me, I help you, and this immediate sharing, particularly in times of need.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Because in those smaller groups, everybody's familiar with each other, and if you're assisting someone, you're directly benefiting the entire group.
Right, exactly. But then, as we transition to these larger, more complex societies, cultural morality, it often imposed a different form of cooperation.
Right.
It's less personal. It's more system driven.
Right. So instead of directly aiding, someone in need, we might contribute to charities, or we pay taxes, right? And that theoretically helps, countless individuals that we will never even meet. It's a less tangible, less personal form of assistance.
Exactly, exactly. And while, such systems might be arguably more efficient, for addressing these larger scale problems, they do lack that immediacy, right? And that personal connection that really aligns with our evolutionary wiring.
And that the disconnect can lead to this sort of internal conflict, right?
Hmm.
Where, you might feel this very strong urge to help someone in need, but the rules or the bureaucracies of our cultural systems, they might actually hinder direct action.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine, a government worker, right? And they really want to help someone, navigate a bureaucratic hurdle, but the regulations, they tie their hands.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of this conflict between, our innate compassion and the constraints of these complex systems.
Right. So it's this constant struggle, right, between what our instincts tell us, which is to help those in immediate need, and what these intricate systems require.
And this conflict, it extends beyond, just resource sharing. Berryhill, he points out, it's present in religious experiences as well. Many individuals, they report a much greater spiritual fulfillment through their, personal practices, things like meditation or prayer, than they do through organized religion.
Right. It's about that direct personal connection, right,
Yeah.
to something larger than yourself.
Exactly. And this might reflect our evolved capacity, for spiritual experience, which like other, moral traits, it likely developed in a much more intimate, small group setting.
Right.
Organized religion with its institutions and its rituals and its hierarchies, it might just feel less natural to us because it operates at a societal level rather than this individual level.
I wonder too if this tension could also explain, why we see these frequent clashes, between sort of official religious doctrines and personal interpretations of faith.
It's certainly something to think about, yeah. And this tension that we're talking about, it also manifests in really modern contexts as well. Take economic inequality, for example.
Yeah, I mean the stark statistics on wealth disparity. I think for a lot of people, it evokes this really visceral sense of unfairness.
And that feeling, it probably stems from those very deeply ingrained instincts that we have, for fairness and reciprocity.
Right.
Imagine, back in those early, hunter-gatherer bands hoarding resources while others struggled. That would have been incredibly detrimental. Sharing was essential for survival.
Right, because survival depended on that cooperation, on that
Yeah.
certain degree of egalitarianism.
Exactly. But now our cultural moral systems, especially the ones that are, linked to these modern economic structures, they frequently justify these vast disparities in wealth and power. We're told that some level of inequality is necessary for progress, for innovation, for individual freedom.
And that creates this troubling dissonance, right?
Yeah.
Where we intuitively sense that something is wrong, but we're participating in these systems that are perpetuating that very injustice.
Right. And that's exactly the tension that Berryhill is underlining here. And we see it in our approach to criminal justice as well.
Yeah, and I imagine this is where the innate desire for retribution, kind of comes into play, right?
Exactly. The whole eye for an eye mentality, that yearning, for punishment that's proportional to the crime, it might be very deeply rooted in these ancient instincts to safeguard the group, to deter harmful behavior.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, when you think about the constant threat of violence that our ancestors would face.
Yeah. Punishment served as a very powerful deterrent in that context.
Right. But our contemporary legal systems, while they do encompass, elements of punishment, they're also founded on these ideals of rehabilitation,
Yeah.
due process, the rule of law.
Right. And those principles can sometimes conflict, with that visceral desire that we have to see a wrongdoer, actually suffer, for their actions.
Exactly. Yeah. We might perceive a sentence, as being too lenient, or we believe that the legal process, is prioritizing the accused's rights over the victim's suffering.
Mm.
And again, this just illustrates that tension between, those primal instincts and the complexities of our modern legal frameworks.
So we're constantly navigating, between these two moral systems, these opposing sets of impulses. What are the kind of broader implications of this?
Yeah.
Of this constant sort of internal struggle?
Well, this is where I think evolutionary philosophy really offers some crucial insights. First and foremost, it helps us to understand, why moral decision making is often so challenging and so conflicted. We aren't simply just evaluating options. We're grappling with these two very distinct, frameworks for judgment.
Yeah, so we're trying to determine which right to prioritize, the one dictated by our evolved instincts, or the one that's prescribed by the rules and the systems that we've created.
Exactly. And this understanding can really illuminate, certain social and political phenomena. For example, take the allure of populist movements.
Okay, how does populism, tie into this whole concept?
Well, populist leaders, they often appeal to those very basic instincts, for fairness, for in-group loyalty, for this clear-cut worldview.
Right.
They're tapping into evolutionary morality, that desire to protect the group, to punish those who are perceived as threats, and they offer these really simplistic solutions to really complex problems.
Yeah, and that can be a very potent message.
Yeah.
Especially during periods of uncertainty or upheaval, when people are really craving reassurance and yearning for this simpler world.
Exactly. And this often manifests as a kind of rejection of the intricate and nuanced systems, right? The ones that are associated with cultural morality, things like bureaucracies, global institutions, even intellectual elites can be viewed as obstacles to a more, instinctive sense of right and wrong.
It's almost like this rebellion against complexity, this yearning for a time when morality was just more straightforward, focused on direct action rather than abstract principles.
It's one interpretation, and this tension, it's not just confined to the political sphere. It's reflected in art and literature as well. Think about the classic hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who defies rules to do what they believe is right, even if it means challenging authority or societal norms.
Right.
That resonates with us because it mirrors this internal conflict that we're all dealing with.
Right. It's this age-old struggle, right, between what we feel is inherently right and what society dictates as being right.
Exactly. And that famous saying, right, the heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing. It kind of encapsulates this beautifully, I think. And it highlights this core insight of evolutionary philosophy, which is that it's not about declaring one system as superior. It's about recognizing that both are constantly interacting and shaping our moral landscape.
So it's not about suppressing or ignoring, our evolved instincts. It's about acknowledging them and understanding them.
Yeah.
And seeking ways to integrate them, with the demands of the modern world.
That's a key takeaway. We have to accept that our moral lives are complex. They're multifaceted, and there aren't these easy universal solutions. We're perpetually balancing these two systems. We're striving to live ethically in a world that often just clashes with those deepest instincts that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an area that really deserves a lot more, exploration and study within evolutionary philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Berryhill also suggests that evolutionary philosophy, it could shed light on some other really profound philosophical questions as well.
Right.
Questions about consciousness, about meaning, even aesthetics.
Mm.
So I'm really eager to kind of delve into those areas in our next segment. So we spent a lot of time talking about morality, and I want to shift gears a bit. Berryhill also suggests that evolutionary philosophy could shed light on other, kind of big philosophical questions like consciousness.
Yeah.
And meaning, even aesthetics.
Yeah, those are some really fertile areas for exploration through this lens.
Yeah, so let's start with consciousness maybe. I mean, that's perhaps, the most fundamental mystery that we face, right? How did subjective experience, how did that feeling of what it's like to be, how did that arise from the material world?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that's puzzled philosophers and scientists, I mean, literally for centuries.
Yeah. So does evolutionary philosophy offer a fresh perspective on this age-old conundrum?
Well, Berryhill suggests that viewing consciousness through this lens of evolution, it might provide a much deeper understanding of its purpose and its origins.
Hmm.
So instead of just asking what as consciousness,
Yeah.
we ask why did consciousness evolve? What evolutionary advantage did it offer our ancestors?
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting way to reframe the question, right?
Yeah.
What kind of advantages might consciousness have conferred?
Well, think about the villages that our ancestors would face. They were navigating complex social environments. They were planning for the future. They were making decisions in these really unpredictable situations. And consciousness, with its ability to model the world, to simulate various scenarios, to reflect on past experiences, that could have been really crucial for successfully addressing those challenges.
Right. So it's not just about being aware of the world. It's about having this capacity for more abstract and flexible thinking.
Exactly. And this enhanced cognitive capacity, it might have provided a significant survival and reproductive advantage, which led to its selection and its propagation
Yeah.
throughout our, evolutionary lineage.
It makes you realize how truly extraordinary consciousness is. We often just take it for granted,
Right.
but it's such a remarkable product of evolution.
It really is. And this raises another, profound question, right? What implications does consciousness have for our understanding of meaning and purpose?
Yeah, and this kind of ties back to our our earlier discussions about evolution being this purposeless process, right?
Hmm.
And yet, humans seem so inherently driven to seek meaning in the world.
Yeah, it's a really compelling paradox, and evolutionary philosophy might offer a way to reconcile those seemingly conflicting ideas. Perhaps our very capacity for meaning making, maybe that evolved, and provided benefits, for social cohesion, for motivation, for coping with adversity.
So even though the universe itself might be, devoid of inherent purpose, our brains evolved to create purpose, to find meaning in the chaos.
That's one interpretation, and this purpose-creating drive, it could explain, why we engage in activities like, art and music and storytelling, even philosophy itself. These pursuits, they might lack direct survival value, but they fulfill this very deep-seated, psychological need for meaning and significance.
It's almost as if we're trying to impose order and meaning onto a world that is inherently, chaotic and indifferent.
In a way, yes. And this brings us to another area where evolutionary philosophy, I think, could offer some unique insights, and that's aesthetics.
Oh, yeah.
Why do we perceive certain things as being beautiful? Why are we drawn to particular patterns or colors or sounds?
Yeah, beauty is such a subjective experience.
Yeah.
But is there a deeper, maybe even evolutionary, basis for our aesthetic preferences?
Well, that's what Berryhill suggests. He says that our aesthetic preferences, they might be linked to our evolutionary past. Perhaps certain landscapes or shapes or even facial features, they signaled safety or abundance or potential mates to our ancestors.
Mhm.
And these preferences, honed over millennia, they would become ingrained in our, perceptual and cognitive systems.
So what we consider beautiful might, on some level, reflect what contributed to the survival and the thriving of our ancestors.
That's the premise. And this could explain, why we often find beauty and symmetry in natural landscapes and in certain types of music. These stimuli might tap into these ancient, neural circuits that associate them with these positive, these life-affirming experiences.
It makes me think about how, some people, they find modern art, very jarring or unsettling.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because it's violating those deep-seated aesthetic preferences that were shaped by our evolutionary history.
It's a fascinating hypothesis, and it just shows how this evolutionary lens can illuminate even the most subjective and seemingly intangible aspects of the human experience, it suggests that our aesthetic sensibilities, just like our moral intuitions, they're not arbitrary. They're rooted in our deep biological and evolutionary heritage.
So we talked about how, evolutionary philosophy could shed light on consciousness and meaning and aesthetics. But what about those core philosophical questions, like the nature of knowledge,
Yeah.
or free will, or reality itself? Can this new perspective, can it offer insights into these more, I guess, traditional areas of inquiry?
Well, Berryhill argues that even those very fundamental philosophical issues, they can benefit from this evolutionary perspective. Take the concept of knowledge, for example.
Yeah.
Instead of merely trying to define what it means to know something, we can explore how our very capacity for knowledge, how that evolved.
Okay.
What limitations might our evolved, cognitive systems, what limitations do those impose on what we can and cannot know?
So it's about understanding, the tools that we use to understand the world.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that those tools themselves might actually influence the very nature of the knowledge that we acquire.
Exactly. And this line of inquiry, it applies to free will as well. Instead of just engaging in these endless debates about, determinism versus agency, we can examine the evolutionary pressures that shaped our decision-making processes, and our sense of self. We can ask, what evolutionary advantages did the experience of free will? What advantages did that provide? And how did this subjective experience, how did it actually shape our behavior and our social interactions?
Right. So it shifts the focus from proving or disproving free will to understanding its potential evolutionary function and its impact on human behavior.
Precisely. And this approach could even illuminate our understanding of reality itself, by recognizing that our perception and our cognition and even our sense of self, that these are products of evolution, we gain a more, I think, a more nuanced and perhaps a more, humble perspective on what we can truly know about the world. It encourages us to recognize those inherent limitations of our evolved minds.
So it's about acknowledging that we are at our core, biological beings. We're shaped by these evolutionary forces, and these forces have molded not just our physical forms, but also our minds and our very understanding of reality. We perceive and we interpret the world through this evolutionary lens.
That's a very profound point, and it underscores the potential of evolutionary philosophy. It's not about reducing everything to biology, but it's about recognizing that our biological nature, it's inextricably linked to our philosophical inquiries. We can't fully understand the human mind and its products, including philosophy itself, without considering the evolutionary forces that shape them.
Right. It's about integrating these two realms. Recognizing that they're not separate domains, but rather they're intertwined aspects of the human experience. Our biology informs our philosophy, and our philosophy in turn shapes how we understand our biology.
Exactly. And that is where the true power of evolutionary philosophy resides, I think. It's not just about, answering old questions in new ways. It's about generating new questions that might not have even arisen without this evolutionary perspective. It opens up these entirely new avenues for philosophical exploration.
It encourages us to think more creatively, to push the boundaries of traditional philosophical inquiry, and to embrace a more interdisciplinary approach to understanding ourselves and the world around us.
Indeed. And as we delve deeper into this really exciting new field, who knows what groundbreaking insights await us.
Well, I, for one, am certainly eager to continue this exploration. So thank you for guiding us through this deep dive into evolutionary philosophy. It's been a truly enlightening and thought-provoking journey.
The pleasure was all mine. And I hope our listeners will continue to contemplate these questions and to explore this ever-evolving world of philosophical inquiry.
Yeah.
By incorporating the insights of evolution. We can enrich our understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe and the very nature of reality itself.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll conclude this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep challenging assumptions, and keep exploring that vast and intricate tapestry of knowledge that makes life so fascinating.